one whatnot. This is the T-Force LCS rundown for week 11 of the summer split in 2014. All the segues straight into the show live, joining you slightly earlier than 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. This is our Super Week special. We're not going to use the eccentric sound effects this week because, well, there's nothing to be that excited about from Super Week. Overall, we had a pretty mild Super Week. That happened.
It was a mediocre.
Mild's the politically correct. We had a pretty terrible Super Week.
That's all right, viewers. I got you. Super Week.
Yeah. Finally over. Don't have to watch this crap anymore.
I'm trying to arm it. Here we go.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
There we go.
The worst thing is I'm just thinking right here, EU versus NALCS, 5-star hip-hop. We
did an Inception horn, too.
That was Greg Credible Mushroom Russo coming up on the awesome hip-hop air horns. I'm also joined this week by Optimus Tom.
And because of that air horn, I wasn't first this week to be introduced.
Dan.
I like the variety.
I'm mixing it up. I'm going me because I'm Matkanorum. Technically now I've gone Greg, Tom, me Matkanorum, Dan Sifa.
Yeah.
You look like you're dancing.
Deck choices are terrible.
And Credible. Wow, I almost said Greg again. Mitch, my cereal box.
But the summoner name's so nice, he has to say it twice.
Without video today, so you won't be able to see me. Yeah.
Yes, for those of you
won't
not
be able to see
joining
me
us,
scowling at all the transitions.
For those of you not joining us live on twitch.tv/TForce podcast, Mitch is unfortunately down a video, so he won't be able to hate my terrible segues. Speaking of terrible segues, Gambit Gaming in Europe really making some moves this week. A word on our format for this week. So normally we hit on Sundays, 9 p.m. on Twitch, and we cover the week's, fun and activities. But here we are at week 11. We're at the end of the summer split. We've had a super week under our belt. We now know for 100% certain the playoff schedules in the upcoming week. So we have lots to discuss. We're starting an hour early. We're going to go through, and for about 45 minutes, we're going to go ahead and discuss the EU LCS, how it ended, what playoffs are looking like, and then we're going to take a quick break, 10 or 15 minutes to pee, get more beer, get more water, and then we'll move over to the NA. So let's start at the very, very bottom of the EU LCS. Let's talk about Gambit. Weird week for Gambit in the sense that not too many losses.
Gambit decided to be really good at the game at the worst possible time for them. Like, it was good because they actually put Copenhagen Wolves on the bottom right now. But for me, watching them and wanting to cheer for Most Glorious Gambit Gaming for a majority of the time I've actually been watching competitive League of Legends, it was really, really depressing to see, like, wow, man, they're like so good all of a sudden. Why couldn't they do that before? Like, what was the key missing factor? And actually, one of the things I think was really important to Gambit's success this week is, A, they stayed in Cologne. They didn't go home. They did a boot camp again. One of the Gambit boot camps, famous thing. And two, they've had an analyst for a while. This guy, Dimitri, I'm sure you've seen him in the interviews they've done in the EULCS. He kind of looks like a Poindexter kind of guy and has like a really thick accent, but he's quirky in himself. But even though they've been working with him, it's been known that certain members haven't been listening to him whatsoever. This week, they had Groove back, and everybody knows Groove. He's like the main guy behind the scenes for Gambit. We saw him walking back and forth behind the players this week, and all of a sudden they start winning. So, like, where the hell were you before Groove? Where the hell were you before Gambit?
Well, let me ask you this, Tom. So Gambit's in 7th place now. That's what they've earned. That's what they boot camped for. How important is this? What are they gaining going into relegations?
They gain a chance to pick their challenger team. For everybody who doesn't know, the relegations or the promotion tournament go about that 6th place gets to choose from the 3 qualifying challenger teams first. So in theory, 6th place gets to play the weakest challenger team. 7th place gets to choose between the 2 remaining teams, and 8th place gets stuck with what is left in the challenger circuit, which is normally the best team possible. So in this case, Gambit has a chance to play not the best team in the challenger scene in Europe, which right now is in a constant flux because H2K lost to SK Prime, who beat Ninjas in Pajamas, and then SK Prime immediately lost to Gamers 2 somewhere else. And so there's these 4 teams in European Challenger Series that are constantly vying for number 1. Both of them, they all look really strong or maybe weak at the same time. But Gambit get the chance of playing the one that looks the least scary in the coming Challenger playoffs, which is good for them, but...
I just hope they pick NIP. That just makes it... Yeah, come on. You know your job, Mr. Storyline. That's like the dream.
No, the dream for me is to have NIP and Gambit both get back into the LCS and then keep the head-to-head tally of who's better, Alex or Gambit.
All right, so do you really think that this week's performance by Gambit says anything about the team? I mean, do you really think that pulling off a couple of big games, and let's take a look at who they played. So they played the Copenhagen Wolves and won. They played Alliance and lost, understandably. They played Millennium and managed to win, and they beat SK Gaming as well. This caused them to go into a tiebreaker against Copenhagen Wolves, where they won that as well. So some big teams, some... obviously Copenhagen Wolves on the lower tier and SK Gaming, even though they pulled out a pretty convincing week overall, they did win a couple of games compared to how they've been performing at least recently. They still got to beat them as well, but I mean, I guess what are you expecting come relegations and let's say they do make it back into the LCS when they hit there?
I'm expecting...
I wasn't actually that impressed. Like, I thought they did well. They won the games. They definitely won definitively. I mean, one of the games that they won, they had like a 20K gold lead at the end. But I mean, the fact that it took them a 20K gold lead or a 23K gold lead to close out a game makes them feel like just another challenger team to me. Like, the thing that's really separates challenger teams from LCS teams is the ability to close out games and the ability to take a lead and end a game, the ability to utilize your comp well. And Gambit didn't really do that. Gambit played mechanically better and they had better decision making, but not a whole lot of that revolved around utilizing their team comp well or closing out well. So it wasn't, I was really happy that they performed as well as they did. I think that's cool, and I think it gives them a much better shot at coming back. But I still think that they're probably on par with one of the better challenger teams, and I cannot imagine much better than that.
What about the Copenhagen Wolves also being very, pretty much in the biggest shit position they possibly could be? Do you think, given what we've seen out of the challenger scene and given where they are as a team right now, that we're going to see them crawl back into the European LCS come our spring split?
I gotta say, I think both Gambit and the Wolves are still in a pretty safe place. As strong as some of the challenger squads do look, like the constant flux of the challenger circuit, especially in Europe, which there's a lot more challenger events outside of the Coke League in Europe than there are in North America. And it used to have, like the Mobile Fire Challenger Series or the NACL or all those other things that just seem not to exist anymore. Europe has the weekly Chaos TV series. They have DreamHacks and IEMs and all these LAN events that actually still have challengers events at them. And it looked like it was just NIP, H2K, NIP, H2K. And then all of a sudden you have Gamers 2 come out of nowhere. They replace their support with another support. All of a sudden they look a lot better. SK Prime, they pick up Kickus in the jungle. They look a lot better. All these challengers teams start clashing with one another. But the thing is, they don't look like LCS quality games. It looks like challenger teams clashing against other challenger teams. So what you have now is you look at Gambit and you look at the Wolves and you look at who they played in Super Week, and you compare them to what like this constant state of challenger circuit is in Europe. And it's really hard for me to say that either one of those teams gets relegated from the LCS, but it's really hard for me to say if they do any better than they did this split.
It seems to me like the one thing the Gambit has that's going to be really good for them to hold their place and to stay in. And I agree. I'd expect much from them next split. They might have a good performance. They might not. I really have no idea. But the one thing that's going to stop them from getting relegated is Diamond as a jungler. Not necessarily because Diamond is the best jungler, but Diamond is a very experienced jungler, and I feel like one of the hardest things to train someone for competitively is jungling, because it is so absolutely and completely different on the competitive scene than it is in solo queue. Like, what you are doing is 100% different. So that, I think Gambit's got a good shot, but I also think that Gambit and Copenhagen Wolves have been playing challenger quality games throughout the entire LCS split. Whenever they win, it feels like both teams are playing sloppy. Like, I feel like I'm looking at just bad games. Like, I'm not excited tactically by what they present. So as far as how they're going to match up against the other challenger teams, I'm not sure, but I can easily see either of them being knocked out.
Yeah, well, overall, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, last split, we didn't see any new teams come into the mix from the challenger scene, so it'll be, I think, a little refreshing to maybe see either Gambit or Copenhagen Wolves get bumped out and a new team move in, unless it's Alxish, and then it's just the same old shit. But let's take a look more towards playoffs at this point. I mean, the rest of the teams, there wasn't a whole lot of movement. We had games kind of ending super weak with like Alliance versus Millennium, where it's, hey, let's just pick a bunch of stuff that we think is fun and exciting, and then have record-breaking games in terms of kills that, you know, completely destroy my fantasy league.
Nif with a 45 assist game now holds the LCS regular season record.
That should never be broken.
That
should never be broken either.
It really should.
Yeah, right? But how do you measure game quality?
Right. No,
like,
that's
you can't
true.
just be like, okay, well, you guys played a really terrible game of League of Legends, so we're not going to give you that record.
I mean,
like, per minute thing. Per minute.
I feel like if you look at records, you can just pretty much say like, hey, here are all the worst games to watch. Like that super long one against what was it, Curse and Complexity last week or the week before. You don't want to sit down and watch that again. You want to fast forward to the last 20 minutes and then start watching that again. It's not what you would expect it to be, I think.
It's like it's the first 20 minutes. It's like the first, 15% of the game and the last 15% of the game. Once it goes past 45 minutes, that's really all you need to watch to get a sense of it. Because it's just, if there's more than like 30 minutes in the middle, it's because teams are just throwing the game back and forth or not being decisive.
Right. So playoffs coming up. By the way, when does playoffs actually start? We have
next week.
So we have next week. We have some challenger games resolving early in the week. I think Tuesday and Wednesday there's some more challenger games playing. Then we go right into playoffs. Then we go into, as I know it, the Challenger Series relegation promotional tournament, whatever they call it, and then we hit Worlds. Correct? That's
I know we have quarterfinals next week. Quarterfinals next week, and then there's a big break at least for the NA, the rest of the playoffs for NA, because they're playing at PAX, right?
Yeah, which is the 28th through the 1st.
Right. So we're still 3.5 weeks away from that.
It's really odd to me that NA gets so much practice time and EU doesn't get as much.
It's just for the event. That's the only reason they're doing it like that, because Gamescom's way earlier.
Yeah, I find that kind of interesting that they have to wait for that.
But NA doesn't get practice time for Worlds. Not fair. Let's send our team to Korea now and shit all over the LCS season.
We're not in.
We're already there.
We're not in North America yet.
So it's gonna be great.
I don't see a date for quarterfinals in North America yet, though. I know that Europe's is next week.
Honestly, I don't know if NA is separated from PAX or not. I don't work on NA, so I don't look at that stuff.
I know they're somehow affiliated, but. I mean, we've got the quarterfinals for Europe is next week, is in the next few days.
Yeah.
But then we wait till the week after, and then they have Gamescom for the semis and finals and third place.
Sure. We also have international wild card at Gamescom, or at least one of the international wild cards, because it's split up into two.
The 3-team wild card, which we don't know the format for yet. I don't think.
I don't know if the format's posted. We know the teams.
There's all 5 teams are decided, but the 2-team wild card, which is the PAX one, only is just a best of 5 for who goes to Worlds.
Bring the rest of us up to speed. Who are those 5 teams and what are they playing for?
So the international wild card tournament was the one that was at Gamescom last year, where we wound up having Gaming Gear EU win the round robin into bracket format and go to Worlds. Basically, all that really did was we got to see Mazarin on camera being very awkward and shy. other than that, they split it into 2 tournaments this year because there's more seeds going to Worlds. So there's now 2 international wildcards. So you have Oceania, or the Australian sector, pretty much. You have Turkey, and you have the CIS, which is basically Europe Northeast, going to Gamescom, and they are playing a format which I don't know the official format. I'm assuming it's similar to last year, which is a round robin. They broke down into group stage. But at this point, since there's only 3 teams, I'm assuming it's just if there's tiebreakers, they play tiebreakers. But one of those teams is going to advance to one of the international wildcard seeds. And then at PAX, there's just Brazil versus the Latin American team. And that is going to wind up being one of those teams goes to Worlds as well. The Oceanic team was known as Avant Gaming, but they recently picked up a new sponsor, which I don't remember the name of off the top of my head.
Legacy.
Legacy, thank you very much. So they're going to wind up playing for Oceania's spot. Turkey is Dark Passage, who we saw last year. We've also seen them at a couple of DreamHack tournaments. Best team in Turkey for a very long time. The CIS team is called Hard Random. They were actually in 7th place after the CIS season, and then came back to beat all of the top teams almost sequentially in order to take the first place seed over Virtuous Pro, who some people may know that organization, but they are going to wind up going to that tournament as well. Then for the PAC side, Brazil, we have Kaboom, who is a team without Koreans, who's actually going from Brazil, which is awesome.
Yeah, that was my favorite part, was when all the Korean teams lost out.
There were a few teams that picked up Koreans. Like there were like 1 or 2 Koreans on 2 teams in Brazil.
Yeah, Pain Gaming, who was in 1st, and Keed Stars, who was in 2nd. Both of them respectively lost. Other Brazilian squad, I forget the name, was Sea Stars or something like that, too, wound up going to the PAX qualifier. And then from Latin America, there's Latin America North and Latin America South. The team from the North, everybody knows them. They were Leon Gaming. They wound up losing out to the Latin America South team, who is known as Pineapple Express. So you're going to have Pineapple Express against Kaboom in one of the funniest best of 5 names ever.
I find it sometimes mystifying when I ask what I perceive to be a very simple question. And then I just like crack open a little hole, and then just Optimus Tom knowledge flows out.
There was literally every region had a final, and some of the regions are split in 2, so they had to have a final before the final. So
Sure.
before everything happens, and then there's 2 other finals to figure out who goes to Worlds.
All right. Well, getting back on track. I think we need to do either an episode or a very small series with all of the other regions that we don't cover through here, and then just talking about how that's going to play into Worlds. Because I feel like just from the schedules that we just reviewed, there may be some shorter episodes in the not-too-distant future, or at least episodes where we find ourselves lacking for things to discuss. So
Well, here's a general question. We may or may not get to now. I'll leave it up to you. What's the holdup on having these regions develop their own LCS style league?
They just have their own.
A lot of them have their own.
We'll put a pin in it. We'll put a pin
I mean,
in
but
it
like
only because...
have a full representation of Worlds instead of fighting for a wild card spot. I mean.
Oh, you mean the smaller ones?
Time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think probably time. Yeah.
I mean, Japan developed a scene about the same time as Korea, but their teams are not nearly as good as Korea.
Right.
And can we mention the fact that the first team for Worlds qualified via Samsung Galaxy Blue? The only ones so far. They are the only ones that are in, and it's very close for either White or SKT1. But that'll be us talking about that another time.
Sure.
Next week.
Well, speaking
Oh, I hope both Samsung teams qualify. I love the Samsung teams. We can talk about Korea another time, though.
Yeah. Speaking of another time, we have SK versus
Where's my
Millennium. SK versus Millennium coming up, and Super Hot Crew versus Optimus Tom Dreamboat of Rockcat.
This is such a heartbreaker. I was hoping Rockcat would get at least 5th so my 2 babies didn't have to play each other.
Now, if I'm not mistaken,
Look
is
at
it...
Steve's face.
I'm just so disappointed in your taste in teams. You drag me onto the Super Hot Crew bandwagon. Like, come on, you have to love them. Like, all right, I kind of like them now, and then you're just like, really, you like Super Hot Crew? How do you not like Rocket?
Listen.
Make up your mind, Tom.
If Super Hot Crew had a different Polish mid laner, I would absolutely love the team. Like, if Overpower was on the Super Hot Crew, Like, how would you go wrong? That would easily be best team in Europe.
Tom's still jockeying for Gambit to be good.
What?
So
did you not see the Froggen interview where he just calls Overpower trash?
Did you not see the Overpower interview? It was like, yeah, I'm just afraid of Froggen. Yeah, that's the same thing.
Hey, Tom, what you need to happen is you need Super Hot Crew to win here. Rocket gets knocked down to relegations. They get knocked out, and then Super Hot Crew just picks up Overpower for some reason. They just don't feel like selfie anymore. And then you'll have no problem. You'll have one team you really love.
Yes.
Well, speaking of the actual games to be played, and the improbability of Tom's real fantasy leagues coming together.
Just gotta tweet highlight reels at Last Shadow. Just be like, hey, Last Shadow, have you seen this sweet Overpower clip?
Let's be real and talk about does it even matter? SK versus Millennium feeding into Alliance, and then Super Hot Crew versus Rockcat feeding into Fnatic. Do you really see either any of those 4 teams being able to put it to Alliance or Fnatic?
No.
Not
Super Hot Crew
at
maybe.
all.
I mean,
Alliance,
like, okay.
we want everyone.
Alliance and Fnatic are almost 100% guaranteed to win, but if anyone has any chance at all, it's Super Hot Crew. And I would say it's like a 3% chance, maybe.
Have you seen their last games? Like, I love Super Hot Crew, but have you seen their last games against Fnatic and Alliance?
I want to, yeah. I guess they don't have that much time to prep. I want to believe that they're going to put something together and actually be 100% prepared in some way that isn't Rengar jungle cheese.
I mean, they have 2 weeks.
They do. They do have more
got a
time to
while.
prepare than normal.
So I think then the better discussion maybe to have is barring, I mean, I think at this point Alliance versus Fnatic, kind of a toss-up. It'll depend on which respective team shows up. I want to lean towards Alliance. I really want Alliance to win because I want to break the Fnatic win streak, but I'm feeling like it's going to be Fnatic.
Let's lean towards this first. Before we get to the actual final, I want someone to convince me that SK Gaming is going to show up against Millennium.
I don't think so.
What? Okay, well, here's the thing, is SK is more consistent than Millennium, but when Millennium's winning, it's such a mess. I feel like when Millennium's doing really well, they're better than SK, but I feel like SK they both fluctuate, but I feel like when Millennium's bad, they're terrible. When they're good, they're amazing. And then SK is kind of just always mediocre. And sometimes it's on the good end of mediocre, and then sometimes it's on the bad end of mediocre. So
They had a good week, though. They took down the top 2 teams, and I mean, lost to Gambit, so who can really say anything about that? But I think they're doing pretty well going into this matchup.
Counter argument: they lost to the top 2 teams who didn't need to win.
True. They beat the top 2 teams, you mean?
Yeah, well, they beat the top 2 teams who didn't have to win.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot for them to play for, but I mean, that's got to be at least something. And they beat Millennium this week, too.
I guess does it start off as a series of 3 or a series of 5?
Everything, I think, is best of 5.
So do you rely on SK's consistency in a series of 5, and then just hope that Millennium can't get 3 games where they get early momentum and then keep that going through? Or
I think SK will be better in a set of 5, but I really don't. I think it's going to be, since they're both teams that fluctuate, it's going to be all about the first game. I imagine that they're both quick to go on tilt. Millennium especially seems to go on tilt pretty easily.
I'm not sold on that. Both teams have a history of going to relegation and going down 0-2 and then winning the next 3 games.
That's true. That's true. Recently their play has been really, really lackluster, but I guess SK has already been relegated. Yeah, I forgot about the SK relegation with the 0-2. They do come back strong.
Then they beat old Super Hot Crew, and then Super Hot Crew got a chance to come back in. Thank you, Lemon Dogs.
So looking at who's potentially going to be their 3rd place bout, Super Hot Crew versus Rockcat.
Like, there's no way that... Wait, so here's one thing. Super Hot Crew, I feel, is extremely untested in best of 3s or best of 5 scenarios. The only time they've done so is in the promotion tournament, and they did it against Cloud9 Eclipse, who were missing their jungler because he was too young to participate. So I feel like Super Hot Crew actually goes into this at a slight disadvantage, considering that with the Challenger circuit the way it is in Europe, Rocket had a bajillion best of 3s to play in, or best of 5s at DreamHacks and IEMs and all these things they could participate in. And Super Hot Crew kind of came about like a couple months before they qualified for the LCS. So going into this one, I feel like Rocket's better prepared for the matchup, but Super Hot Crew, like, judging by how Rocket played this Super Week, they were turned into like Dignitas. They were winning all these games, and then all of a sudden they lost. And Super Hot Crew is a team that, like, as soon as somebody like gets in a bad Baron situation, they just run away with the game.
One thing I didn't take into consideration, but I'm now looking at now, is just the historical matchups between these two teams. And I don't have all of the data put up in front of me, but at least speaking in last week's Super Week, SK actually beat out Millennium, and Rockcat beat out Super Hot Crew. So do you guys see that as being sort of any indication as to how this is going to play out in the coming weeks here, or do you think this is kind of just moot information at this point?
I think it's, especially in a best of 5 series, I think there's a lot of pressure on the coaches. So I think this is an excellent situation to decide who has better support staff, because prepping for a best of 5 is significantly more difficult than prepping for a single game, because if you put everything on a single strategy and they beat out that single strategy, you're screwed for the whole set. And if you put everything into multiple strategies, you're more spread out, and so there's a lot of decisions to be made, and you really need to know the strengths and weaknesses of each team's respective players in order to make like good decisions. And I think I don't actually know much at all about SK's support staff, and I don't really know much about Rockcats either. The only one I'm actually familiar with is Super Hot Crew, and they're really hit miss. So I'm kind of skeptical as far as support staff goes on what their plans are going to be coming into this week.
As far as Rocket support staff goes, like, I honestly value Veggie, who's their coach, who used to be their jungler and used to compete in everything a lot more.
Veggie?
Veggie. His name is Veggie. He's a very, very Polish astute dude, but I actually value him higher than Last Shadow. Not saying that Last Shadow is bad at the game, because he's extremely good, especially if he's going to be as high as he is on the Korean ladder. And like, he has a good understanding of the game, but Veggie's been in the competitive shoes. He's known how to adapt to that situation.
And I think it's not even necessarily about the competitive shoes, because I think Last Shadow has competitive StarCraft experience, so he understands the competitive pressure, for sure. I think it's about knowing the respective players. I think on paper, like, Last Shadow can look at the stats, he can look at the strengths and weaknesses, he can talk to the players, but he has never had to play with those people in competitive games, whereas Veggie has much more experience with the team as a whole, and like understands and gets to work with his team directly, which means that he probably understands much better like what each individual player needs to be successful in a game of League of Legends.
I really like that you bring that point up too, because go and behold, it segues into another point I had. Last Shadow's not there with the team. He's in Korea, and Veggie is right there with Rocket. One of the things that Rocket said in their pre-match video, like before they beat Super Hot Crew the previous time, was that we are focusing on Selfie. Selfie, he's a really good individual player, but if we shut him down, Super Hot Crew can't do anything. He'll go on tilt, etc., etc.
Oh yeah, Selfie's the Dyrus of Super Hot Crew.
Pretty much. Like, if they shut down Selfie in game 1, Selfie will go on tilt for the rest of the series. So if Overpow versus Selfie, even though Overpow isn't super aggressive, Yankas is. Most First Bloods in the EU LCS, plays extremely aggressive junglers. It's really going to be, can Impaler protect Selfie and keep him from going on tilt, because they don't have the support staff literally right there to snap him out of it for the next game? Or will Rocket literally put him on that emotional roller coaster into losing the series?
And is Last Shadow going to come to the event is a huge question. Because, I mean, I assume, and I'm not sure about this, but you get to talk to your coach in between games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, I mean, having someone there to be like, calm down, like, it's okay, like, work it out. Like, and whoever's a better discipline coach at that point is going to be a huge factor, because, I mean, if you don't know how to calm a player down or be like, how to make him not go on tilt, then you're going to be screwed. Because once they're on tilt, if you can't stop it, all the games are just done.
So, given all of this, who do you guys favor winning their individual rounds? So SK versus Millennium, Super Hot Crew versus Rocket, and then who are you taking to Worlds? Basically, who's going to win that third place matchup?
Well,
it's really hard. After talking with Tom, I feel like Rocket's going to be, just because he makes really good points about the support staff. But on the other hand, I cannot, in any situation, see Rocket beating Fnatic or Alliance. Like, it's just not gonna happen.
No, could they beat SK or Millennium and get third?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about here. No one's gonna argue that unless some mysterious fluke happens and like somebody manages to beat either Alliance and Fnatic and isn't one of the other. you're going to get into that third place match. One of those teams is going to Worlds, rather. A third team is going to Worlds, and who's that team going to be?
This is horrible.
All right.
I feel like we can each pick one, guys.
I'm going to do
I
it.
feel like
All right.
it's just
All right, because no one else is going to pick them, I'm going to go with this way. So my friend Jesus and I, a couple weeks ago, when Roccat snapped their losing streak and started winning, he bet me that SK would make it to Worlds. And I was like, all right, then, I'm going to take Roccat. I was drunk, and Roccat looked really good at the time. And we put $30 on it. But if any of the other teams make it that are not SK and Roccat, nobody wins the bet. So I'm going to stick to that one and say, screw you, Jesus. Rockat's going to Worlds, and they're going to beat Millennium in the 4th place match. SK isn't even going to make it there.
Wow. Ooh, I got to go against you on that one. I think SK will beat Millennium.
Hold on.
I want them to take it all.
But will they beat the 3rd, 4th place match?
This is really hard. All these teams are bad, which is what
Yeah.
makes it all these teams
Tom.
are inconsistent and unreliable and
I'm
part of
unreliability.
this shit heap that has been like the rat race behind 1st and 2nd in EU for so long that it's really hard for me to say who's going to win.
It's
because none of them are consistent.
Killing it, right? You can't even say which of them is going to be consistently good or bad or worse than the other teams because they've all had their good moments and they've all been really disappointing. And there seems to be not even a trend as to like which to expect at this point.
I feel like if the entire like EU bracket was like that, if everyone had been inconsistent, I would be really excited. But since only the bottom teams have been really inconsistent, I just don't care. Like I'm just not interested anymore. The hype is gone.
So, of all of the minimal hype teams, Dan, who are you picking?
I mean, I'm still on the Rocket hype train. The whole support staff thing convinced me. I don't like Millennium or SK at all, and I think that whichever one of them comes out on top is going to lose to whoever wins between Rocket and Super Hot Crew.
Tom, who did you have? Did you have a Super Hot Crew?
I have Rocket.
Oh, you have Rocket. Okay.
I like that the discussion boiled down to support staff and not players or anything. It's gotten to that point where we're going. Well, I know that we're talking about best of fives. We're talking about more than just the players. It has more to do with more than just individual skill. But we haven't talked about that much. So if I find it amusing,
individual skill should not be discounted, though. I think it'll be SK and Rocket with SK taking it.
I think the general point that we've kind of come down to is considering the way these teams kind of go up and down and the way that no team really seems outright better than the other one, it really comes down to how they prepare for the matchup against the other team rather than like, is there going to be one player that carries the whole game? Like when you look at SK, they're not a team of having one person carry their game. They're a team of having their things go the way they need to and then closing the game out as a team. With Rocket, you have Yankos making things happen in the early game, and then the team needs to group up and be able to close the game out after they farm for 30 minutes. Super Hot Crew is the one that we kind of focused on a little bit more, where it was like if Selfie does good, Super Hot Crew wins. If he does terrible, then they lose. And you get to Millennium, and it's like, well, Millennium is if they function well as a team and they get a pick comp that works, they're fine. If they fall behind, doesn't matter who does good, they lose.
No, I know. I understand that. I wasn't trying to disagree there. I just think that it's kind of amusing that we're to that point. We're looking that far into it, and
so who's your pick?
I'm going with Millennium because why not throw somebody out there? I'm throwing somebody else out there. I don't really have a good reason for it, but I really don't like picking from the last of the kids on the playground.
One of us will be right.
One
of us will be right.
Yes.
No one picked Super Hot Crew.
No, I'm putting I'm gonna stay on the train. I'm not getting off the train. I'm gonna stay on the Super Hot Crew hype train.
I'm gonna jump on the train on the last minute so that someone is on the train in case it reaches the station. Just maybe.
Here's why. I think Rockat's inconsistency comes in. Super Hot Crew's able to do it to them in 5. And that Millennium beat SK in a really close 3-2, but then can't keep it together for the full time and end up losing to Super Hot Crew. I think Super Hot Crew has kind of like, of all of the low consistencies among the teams that we're looking at right now, Super Hot Crew has kind of like that mid-ground. I'm only basing this off the way by our fantasy league and how that committed to my points. So that's how I'm voting. That's how I'm feeling. And just while we're on the topic of voting, who you guys going to give it to for finals champions? Dan, who do you got, Alliance or Fnatic? Or some weird third team because you feel like it?
No, we've already been over this. There's no third team. Alliance. I'd say Alliance. They're innovating, and I went on that whole tangent the other day about how no one innovates, but I will say that after the Riven jungle was played consistently, it's clearly an innovation and not just like a one-of cheese strat. And the same thing with, with just in general with their team comps, I think Alliance is ahead of the game as far as EU meta goes.
Okay. And Greg?
I'm gonna have to stick with my boys, Fnatic.
Tom?
I'm rocking Fnatic with this one. I love Alliance, and I think that they're extremely good team, but Fnatic shows up in Best of X series. Like, there's no way to put that behind you. I say Fnatic take it. It's gonna be close, maybe 3-2, but Fnatic take it.
And
I'll give that it'll be close, but yeah, I gotta agree with Tom.
Just to dip in my personal opinion so we can realize it's a 2v2 here. I'm going with Alliance, not because I have faith that they'll win, but just because I want them to win. I don't want Fnatic to win, just because they always win. And I hate this, let's do mediocre in the beginning, then pull together at the end, and then come back and win, which Fnatic seems to love to do. If you're going to be a dominant team and win all the time, and don't.
Wait, do I get the tipping vote then?
You do get the tipping vote. You do get the tipping vote. It's either going to be Fnatic or Alliance, and your choice is.
I'm going to go with Alliance.
Ooh,
I'm going to be
Alliance.
I'm going to be curious to see if the first, second, third kind of matters a lot. Like last year, obviously first, second, third, or first place at each region besides Europe got those buys into Worlds, and they haven't obviously released the entirety of how Worlds is going to work. I know it's going to be group stages, but I wonder if they'd put the first place of Europe with a lower placed Korean team, something. So I know it doesn't matter right now, but it'll be curious to see what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the seeding works. I do know it's all group stages, but I think that
I really hope that fix it up.
Well, I would really hope that they would announce these things before finals, that they would announce how the seeding is going to work, so that the teams actually know what the pressure is and where they're going to end up.
They start slotting themselves in, or at least they're able to see it. Because if you say like, oh, if we finish first in Europe, we don't have to play first in Korea in our group, which I think would kind of make sense, but we'll have to see. There's 16 teams. There's a lot of people from everywhere.
Well, on the flip side too, if you look at the tables and you see like maybe first place in Europe has to not play first place in Korea, but first place in China's in their group, and maybe the European strategy is like, all right, well, we don't want to play against something aggressive, and we could go for like a more mid-gamey kind of strategy. Like you wind up getting into situations there where it's like, instead of teams trying their hardest to get first place in their region, they're trying their hardest to get the best seed, which might be second place.
Yeah.
Well, I think you have to design the tournament in a way that makes first seed the best seed, like unarguably the best seed, because I do think that comes into question, like, especially when there's tournaments where seeding is really important. Like, is it just better for you to lose a game sometimes? Like, is losing the game more beneficial for your team? Which is shitty, and no one wants to think about that from a competitive standpoint. I'm sure that's like Riot's biggest fear is like teams intentionally losing games, and I'm sure there's got to be some clause about it in the contracts. But
the worst part about it is when you have like an eight-team group stage and there's two groups or whatever the hell they're doing with the 16 teams. I think it's two groups, right? Yeah, it's something like that.
I'm not sure. It might be 4-4. I don't think so though.
If it's like two groups, it's like really hard to balance it. If it's 4-4, it's a lot easier to balance it because then you can have all the first places in different groups and then fill it in with everybody else.
But there's 5.
Yeah, so.
But there's 5 first places essentially, if you count Garena.
If you count Garena, yeah.
Yeah.
If you count Garena.
Forgot about Garena.
Yeah, I mean,
most
TPA,
people do.
TPA's, after All Stars, they forgot about TPA.
No, TPA is not going. It's AHQ. I got this.
AHQ.
I mean, they're still probably going. There's still 3 going from there.
There's still 3 going from the region, but AHQ first place. Got this. Let's go there.
Is it only 2? Is it 2 or 3? I forget.
I
even made a document about this, so I really should know. But
the document's not there.
I updated it recently just because a little bit happened, but
sure. All right, well,
here nor there.
That's going to wrap up our discussion on the European LCS for this week, rounding up to Week 11 Super Week. We are going to go ahead and take a quick break, but before we do, I want to read some fan mail that came in over last week, actually answering my question of how and when war cheering started throughout a game. Listener NL Demo, and forgive me if I've mispronounced your name, writes in on this week's podcast. They asked the chat when the war cheering started. I can answer that, as I was actually there live. Actually, I'm fairly certain Optimus Tom was too, with a smiley face. War cheering started at IPL 3. I can't remember exactly who was playing at the time, but I do believe it was a pretty slow game. However, there is more history to it than that. In StarCraft 2, under the most glorious Day 9, we started cheering for a single worker kill probes, drones, and SCVs. Even before that, it was natural progression of SC2's spectators moving over to League that brought about war cheering. It seems silly from afar, but it's fun in a crowd. Try making it into a drinking game at home. Thanks a lot, NL Demo, for answering that.
This one goes out to you, buddy.
There you go. You get an.
It's just the best sound.
It really is.
We actually had a question in chat too. They wanted to make sure we were paying attention while we were watching the games this week, and they want to know. I'm gonna actually find the exact thing. It's TH Cabby or Cabby, I guess, who asked us just to see if you guys have really watched this week. Who do you think is currently the best support player? He thinks there's only one possible answer so far, but I want to kind of get everybody's opinion. NA and EU, I'm assuming, is the question.
Ooh.
Who is the best support player in the combined LCS?
Crepo.
And it explodes.
I will never be convinced otherwise.
There's a
I will never be
huge
convinced
argument.
otherwise.
Oh no. There's a very clear one. It's Nif because he had 45 assists in one game.
Can't do that.
That's obviously it.
These arguments
Stats speak for everything.
Yeah, but some guy flashed hook, so he's the best. Like, what? It's not about that. It's about like who fits into the team the best and who does what is necessary for their team. And I feel like for me, and as much as I hate Xpecial, I'm gonna say
Son
Xpecial.
of a bitch. You.
Well, okay, no, we can both
just
talk about this. The thing is, like, Curse is doing really well now, and he's obviously a clear voice, and he does what is necessary for the team to pull out and win games. And it's a good thing.
You took away, Dan, a transformative moment for me, where I give it to Xpecial, and it's twofold. I hate Curse, number one, and two, I don't really like TSM right now. So you took both parts of what was going to be so good about me picking Xpecial for the best support, and really supporting a team, and just threw it out.
God, you guys really don't pay attention when you watch these games.
We have Crepo and Xpecial.
How the hell?
Best support is overpowered.
Overpowered because he supports his team.
Well, he did
kills.
play Morgana mid lane, but
okay.
How the hell does nobody vote for Yellow Star?
Yellow Star's good. He's
Good.
He's
I guess,
statistically the best support in both regions. He is the shot caller for Fnatic, and he literally makes it so the team, not only just Reckless, but the team gets going. People are saying Crepo and Kiwi Kid because they roam around the map. They're looking so great. That was the answer in chat, by the way, was Kiwi Kid because he went 4-0 on Braum before throwing the game for them, or Dignitas threw the game entirely, but that's NA discussion. But like Yellow Star is the original, I'm going to be all over the map support and then go back to his AD carry so his AD carry can continue to snowball the lead. Like, I guess it blows my mind when people like Afromu is the closest you get to Yellow Star, and Afromu is really, really good.
Well, okay,
does
he
shot
clarify? The same guy who asked the question said just this week, but I think it's hard to say just this week. But just this week, it's definitely for me not Yellow Star. But I could see in the greater scheme of things, like yes, I would say Afromu for NA, and yes, I would say Yellow Star for Fnatic.
I mean,
The thing with Yellow Star is he was dragging ass for the entire first half of the split.
That's my point.
What?
He was.
He was not.
Okay,
Oh
but
my
he was
God,
the
how
only player
blind
on
you have
that
to
team
be.
that was not Reckless that was doing well.
So was
But
dragging
you
ass. If we're
can't-
talking about Fnatic and players who were
But
dragging ass.
you can't say that as a support. He is so crucial to the team, and he carries the team through, and he's everything for the team, and then not be able to, in some way or shape or form, not attribute the terrible nature of their first half of the season to
If
him.
nobody listens to him, then you can't do anything. So as an Xpeke and Sign, I just weren't listening to him.
It's all their fault.
I'll give it to a support player who does more for even a losing team. If a support player can go in and be transformative to a team, it doesn't really matter where they land in the standings. Sure, Curse hit their 4 fourth place, status, but where were they really looking beforehand for a team that was having so many problems? I think when you can come in and actually be a strong force for the team, it doesn't really matter what statistics fall down to. It's a support role, and you're supporting your team.
If I had to give it to somebody based off on how well they did for the team itself, like everything aside from the fact that Yellow Star is like the best support in the world right now, or best support in the LCS regions right now, like I gotta agree, it's Crepo. Like there's no other player on a losing team like that has done that well consistently for his team. Like, what are you doing with that cork?
You know who doesn't get this award is Lust Boy.
Lust Boy.
Okay, okay, hold on.
Can I go back and give the award to Glee?
That's like saying that that CLG's support who played this week isn't the one, baby.
Wait,
because the sample size is too small.
Can we call him his regular name instead of just the name he had to shorten to?
Baby Eater?
Baby Eater?
Yeah, Baby Eater.
All right, and with Baby Eater, we are going to take
murder in his eyes.
We are going to take a 15-minute break, and we will join you for NA discussions.